Have you ever noticed how some people talk about having six figures in savings like it's no big deal, while you're over here celebrating because you finally got your emergency fund up to $3,000? Maybe you've been trying to save money for years, reading all the personal finance advice, following budgeting apps, cutting back on lattes, and somehow you still can't seem to break past $10,000 or $20,000 in total savings. You watch that number slowly climb, then something happens and it drops back down, and you start all over again. It feels like you're trying to fill a bathtub while someone keeps pulling the drain plug, and you're starting to wonder if $100,000 in savings is even possible for someone like you, or if that's only for people who make way more money than you do. Here's the truth that's going to hit hard. Most people will never save $100,000 in their entire lives. Not because they can't, but because they're making specific mistakes that guarantee they'll stay stuck below this threshold forever. These aren't dramatic failures or catastrophic financial decisions. They're subtle patterns of behavior that seem harmless in the moment, but compound over time to keep you perpetually broke. The good news is that every single one of these mistakes is fixable, and there's one specific strategy that changes everything. But before we get to that solution, you need to understand exactly why you're failing right now, because awareness is the first step toward actually fixing the problem. Let's start with the most fundamental reason people never hit $100,000, and it's that they're approaching saving completely backwards. Most people operate on what I call the leftover method of saving. They get paid, they pay their bills, they spend on whatever they want or need throughout the month, and then if there's anything left over at the end, maybe they move it to savings. The problem with this approach is that there's never anything left over. Your spending will always expand to consume whatever money is available. It's called Parkinson's law applied to personal finance, and it's why people making $40,000 in people making $100,000 often have the same amount in savings, which is basically nothing. Think about what happens with this leftover method. You get paid $3,000, rent takes $1,200, car payment and insurance take $500, utilities and phone take $200. Now you've got $1,100 left for the entire month for food, gas, entertainment, and everything else. You tell yourself you'll be careful and save whatever's left, but then you need new work clothes, the car needs an oil change, you go out with friends a few times, you order takeout when you're too tired to cook, and somehow by the end of the month, that $1,100 is gone. Every month you have good intentions about saving, and every month you save nothing because spending always comes first. The people who actually hit $100,000 in savings flip this equation completely. They pay themselves first before spending on anything else. The day they get paid, money automatically moves to savings before they even see it. If they get paid $3,000, maybe $450 moves to savings immediately, and they have to figure out how to live on the remaining $2,550. This isn't easy, but it works because now saving isn't optional or dependent on having money left over. It's treated like a bill that must be paid, except instead of paying some company, you're paying your future self. This single shift in approach, moving from leftover saving to pay yourself first saving, is the difference between people who build wealth and people who stay broke their entire lives. It sounds simple, almost too simple to matter, but the psychological and practical impact is enormous. When you have to live on less because you've already moved money to savings, you find ways to make it work. You cook more at home, you find free entertainment, you question purchases more carefully. The constraint forces creativity and discipline that would never emerge if you had access to your full paycheck all month. But let's be honest, even if you're paying yourself first, you're probably not saving enough to actually hit $100,000 in any reasonable time frame. This brings us to the second major reason people never reach this milestone, and it's that they have no idea what savings rate is actually required to get there. They're saving 3% or 5% of their income and wondering why their progress is so slow. Let me give you the math that will either motivate you or depress you, depending on your current situation. Let's say you make $50,000 per year and you save 5% of that, which is $2,500 annually, or about $208 per month. At that rate, with no investment returns, it would take you 40 years to save $100,000. 40 years. That's your entire career from age 25 to age 65 just to hit six figures in savings. And that's assuming you never have an emergency that forces you to dip into savings, which we all know isn't realistic. If you're earning investment returns of, say, 7% annually, you'd hit $100,000 in about 23 years, still nearly a quarter century to reach this goal. Now let's run the same numbers with a 15% savings rate, which is what financial experts actually recommend.
At $50,000 annual income, that's $7,500 per year, or $625 per month. With 7% investment returns, you hit $100,000 in just over 9 years. With a 20% savings rate, you get there in under 7 years. The difference between a 5% savings rate and a 20% savings rate is the difference between taking 4 decades to hit your goal and taking less than 1 decade. Same income, wildly different outcomes based purely on the percentage you're saving. This is where most people mentally check out. They look at those numbers and think there's no way they can save 15% or 20% of their income. They're barely making ends meet as it is. How are they supposed to save an extra $400 or $500 per month? And this brings us to the uncomfortable truth that nobody wants to hear. If you genuinely cannot save 15% to 20% of your income, you have exactly 2 options. Either your income is too low or your spending is too high. There's no third option where you just magically save more without changing anything. The math doesn't work that way. For most people, the problem is spending, not income. They've inflated their lifestyle to consume their entire paycheck, and they've convinced themselves that every expense is necessary when a huge portion of it is actually optional. The $500 car payment on a vehicle that's worth more than half their annual salary, the $1,400 rent on an apartment that's nicer than they need, the $400 per month on restaurants and food delivery, the $150 on subscription services they barely use, the $200 on a phone plan with unlimited everything. Each individual expense seems reasonable in isolation, but add them all together and they've structured the life that makes saving impossible.
The third reason people never hit $100,000 is related to this spending problem, and it's lifestyle inflation. This is the silent killer of wealth building that nobody talks about enough. Every time people get a raise or a bonus or any increase in income, instead of banking that extra money, they immediately upgrade their lifestyle to match. They move to a more expensive apartment, they buy a nicer car, they start eating out more often. Their spending rises in perfect lockstep with their income, which means they never actually get ahead financially. Let me paint you a picture of how this plays out over a career. Someone starts their first job at $35,000 per year. They're living frugally, sharing an apartment with roommates, driving an old car, cooking at home, because that's all they can afford. They may be saving $100 a month, which feels like an accomplishment. Then they get promoted, and now they're making $50,000. Instead of continuing to live like they make $35,000 and banking that extra $15,000 per year, they upgrade everything. New apartment without roommates, nicer car, better wardrobe, more dinners out. Their spending jumps from $32,000 annually to $47,000 annually. They're still only saving $100 a month despite making 43% more money. This pattern repeats over and over. At $70,000, they're spending $65,000. At $90,000, they're spending $85,000. They're always living right up to the edge of their income, regardless of what that income is. Meanwhile, someone else starts at the same $35,000 and makes a different choice. Every time they get a raise, they save at least half of the increase. When they go from $35,000 to $50,000, they increase their spending by $7,500, but save the other $7,500. They're now saving about $800 per month. When they hit $70,000, they're living on $50,000 and saving $20,000 annually. By the time both people are making $90,000, the first person still has basically nothing saved, while the second person has crossed $100,000 and is well on their way to real wealth. The fourth major reason people never save $100,000 is emergencies and unexpected expenses that constantly drain their savings. This might seem like bad luck, but it's actually a planning failure. Life is going to throw unexpected expenses at you constantly. Your car will break down, your laptop will die, you'll have medical bills, a family member will need help. These aren't actually unexpected, they're completely predictable events that happen to everyone. The only question is when, not if. If you're not prepared for these inevitable expenses, every single one becomes a crisis that forces you to drain whatever savings you've managed to accumulate. Here's what this looks like in practice. You finally get your savings up to $5,000 and you're feeling good about your progress. Then your car needs $1,200 in repairs, back down to $3,800. You rebuild over the next few months and hit $6,000. Then you have a medical emergency that costs you $2,000 even after insurance, down to $4,000. You slowly climb back to $7,000, then your laptop dies and you need to buy a new one for $800, down to $6,200. This cycle repeats
endlessly, and you never make meaningful progress because you're constantly responding to emergencies instead of preventing them. The people who successfully save $100,000 build multiple layers of financial defense. They have a separate emergency fund that they never touch except for true emergencies. They have a car replacement fund that they contribute to monthly, so when their car eventually dies, they're not forced to go into debt. They have a home maintenance fund if they own. They have insurance that actually covers things instead of just the minimum required by law. They think ahead about what could go wrong and they prepare for it financially. This preparation means when something goes wrong, it's an inconvenience, not a catastrophe. They handle it without touching their long-term savings, and their progress toward $100,000 continues uninterrupted. The fifth reason is consumer debt, and this one is absolutely brutal in how effectively it prevents wealth building. If you're carrying credit card balances, car loans, personal loans, or any other consumer debt, you're trying to save money while simultaneously paying massive amounts of interest that cancels out your progress. It's like running on a treadmill and wondering why you never get anywhere. The math doesn't work. You cannot save your way to wealth while you're paying 18% interest on credit card debt or 8% on a car loan. Let me show you exactly how destructive this is. Let's say you're saving $300 per month toward your $100,000 goal. That's great, except you're also carrying $15,000 in credit card debt at 18% interest and making minimum payments of $450 per month. You're paying roughly $225 per month just in interest charges. So you think you're making progress by saving $300, but you're actually losing $225 to interest, meaning your real progress is only $75 per month. At that rate, it'll take you over 110 years to save $100,000, which is obviously never going to happen. The people who hit $100,000 in savings eliminate all consumer debt before they even try to save aggressively. They understand that debt repayment is the best guaranteed return on investment they'll ever get. Paying off an 18% credit card is equivalent to earning an 18% return on your money, which is better than almost any investment you could make. So they attack debt with intensity, putting every spare dollar toward the highest interest debt first. Only after they're completely debt-free do they redirect that money toward building savings. This might mean they don't start aggressively saving until they're 30 or 35, but once they start, their progress is real and sustainable because they're not being dragged down by interest payments. The sixth reason people never reach $100,000 is lack of income growth over time. Some people get stuck at a certain income level and stay there for decades. Maybe they're in a job with limited upward mobility. Maybe they're not developing new skills that would make them more valuable. Maybe they're just comfortable where they are and never push for raises or promotions. Whatever the reason, their income stays basically flat while the cost of living keeps rising, which makes it progressively harder to save money over time. Think about someone making $45,000 who stays at that level for 15 years. In year one, after taxes and basic living expenses, they might have $8,000 available for savings and discretionary spending. By year 15, with inflation, their purchasing power has eroded significantly. Those same basic living expenses now consume more of their income, leaving maybe $3,000 available. Their ability to save has actually gone backwards in real terms, even though their nominal salary stayed the same. They're making no progress toward $100,000 because their financial situation is slowly deteriorating. Compare this to someone who actively works on increasing their income over time. They start at $45,000, but through a combination of job changes, skill development, and negotiating raises, they're making $75,000 15 years later. Even if their spending has increased somewhat, the gap between income and expenses has grown dramatically. They went from having $8,000 available to maybe $25,000 available annually. That increased gap is what makes aggressive saving possible. You simply cannot save your way to $100,000 on a stagnant low income. At some point, you have to address the income side of the equation. The seventh reason is what I call the no plan problem. Most people who are trying to save money don't actually have a specific plan for how they're going to reach $100,000. They're just vaguely trying to save more without any concrete numbers or timeline. They don't know exactly how much they need to save each month to hit their goal. They don't know what savings rate is required. They don't have a target date. They're operating on hope rather than math, and hope is not a financial strategy. Let me show you what a real plan looks like. Someone decides they want to hit $100,000 in savings within 10 years. They're starting from zero and they assume they can earn 7% annual returns by investing in low-cost index funds. They plug those numbers into a calculator and discover they need to save $581 per month to reach their goal. Now they have a concrete target. They can look at their current income and spending and figure out if $581 per month is realistic. If it's not, they can adjust either the timeline or they need to find ways to increase income or decrease spending. The point is, they have an actual plan with specific numbers that they can execute and track. Without this level of planning, people just save whatever feels like a lot in the moment, which is never enough. They put away $200 one month and feel proud of themselves. Then they save nothing for 3 months. Then they save $100 for a month. There's no consistency, no clear target, and therefore no real progress. The people who actually hit $100,000 have done the math. They know exactly what needs to happen each month, and they make it happen regardless of how they feel or what else is going on. The 8th reason is investment returns, or rather, the lack of them. A lot of people who are trying to save money are keeping it all in a regular savings account, earning maybe 0.5 to 1% interest. They're scared of the stock market or they don't understand investing, so they leave everything in cash. This might feel safe, but it's actually costing them enormous amounts of money over time through both missed returns and the erosion of purchasing power due to inflation. Let me show you the difference this makes. If you save $500 per month for 15 years in a savings account earning 1% interest, you'll end up with about $93,000. You didn't quite make it to $100,000. Now, run the same numbers with that money invested in a diversified portfolio earning 7% annually. You end up with about $157,000. That's $64,000 more wealth from the exact same monthly savings, just because of the different return rates. The difference between cash and invested money is literally the difference between failing to reach your goal and exceeding it by 57%. The people who successfully reach $100,000 understand that saving and investing are not the same thing. Saving is setting money aside. Investing is putting that money to work, earning returns that help it grow faster than inflation. They keep a small emergency fund in cash, maybe $5,000 to $10,000, and everything beyond that goes into investments. They're not trying to pick stocks or time the market. They're putting money into simple index funds and letting compound interest do the heavy lifting. This willingness to invest rather than just save is what allows them to reach $100,000 in 10 years instead of 20 years with the same monthly contribution. The 9th reason people never hit $100,000 is comparison and lifestyle pressure. They're constantly comparing themselves to other people and feeling pressure to keep up. Their friends buy new cars, so they feel like they need a new car. Their coworkers go on expensive vacations, so they book trips they can't afford. Their social media feed is full of people apparently living amazing lives, so they spend money trying to create that same appearance for themselves. This comparison trap drives spending decisions that have nothing to do with what they actually want or need, and everything to do with not feeling left behind. Here's what nobody tells you about the people who appear to have it all together financially. Most of them are broke. They're financing the lifestyle with debt. They're living paycheck to paycheck despite high incomes. They're stressed about money constantly. The appearance of wealth is not actual wealth, but people fall for the illusion and make spending decisions based on what everyone else seems to be doing. Meanwhile, the actual millionaires in your neighborhood are driving 10-year-old cars and living in modest homes, but you'd never know it because they're not broadcasting their wealth. The people who save $100,000 let go of caring what anyone else thinks. They drive cars that are paid off even if they're not impressive. They live in homes they can actually afford. They skip expensive group activities without guilt. They understand that building wealth requires making different choices than the broke masses, and they're comfortable being different. This freedom from social pressure means their spending decisions are based on their actual values and goals, not on impressing people they don't even like. The 10th and final reason people never save $100,000 is that they give up. They start with good intentions, maybe they save for a few months, but then they have a setback or they get discouraged by how slowly the progress feels, and they just stop trying. They convince themselves that $100,000 isn't realistic for someone in their situation. They decide that sacrificing their current lifestyle isn't worth it. They rationalize that they'll never be rich anyway, so they might as well enjoy life now. And with that mental surrender, any chance of reaching the goal disappears. The truth is that saving $100,000 is realistic for the vast majority of people who earn a middle-class income. It's not easy, and it requires making choices that most people aren't willing to make, but it's absolutely achievable. The people who get there are the ones who maintain belief that it's possible, even when progress feels slow. They don't give up after a setback. They adjust their plan and keep going. They stay focused on the goal through months and years when it feels like nothing is happening. And eventually, the compound interest kicks in and the pace accelerates, and they cross the finish line. So now we get to the solution, the one thing that changes everything if you actually implement it. It's called the anti-budget, and it works like this. Instead of trying to track every expense and categorize everything you spend, which is tedious and most people quit doing after 2 weeks, you simply automate your savings first and spend whatever's left guilt-free. The day you get paid, money automatically transfers to your investment account. A set amount goes to your emergency fund until it's fully funded. Another amount goes to specific savings goals, like a car replacement fund. Whatever's left in your checking account after all the automated transfers is yours to spend however you want without tracking or guilt.
This system works because it removes willpower from the equation. You're not trying to resist spending through the month, hoping you'll have money left over to save. You're not tracking every coffee purchase and feeling bad about it. You've already saved at the beginning of the month, so whatever's in your checking account is genuinely available to spend. The constraint on your spending isn't your willpower or your budget tracking. It's simply how much is actually in your checking account after you've paid yourself first. Here's how you implement this. Calculate how much you need to save each month to hit $100,000 in your target timeframe. Set up automatic transfers on payday to move that money to investments immediately. Set up another automatic transfer for your emergency fund until it reaches 3 to 6 months of expenses. Set up transfers for any other specific savings goals. Make sure your fixed bills are automated. Whatever's left is your lifestyle money. Spend it on whatever you want without guilt or tracking because you've already taken care of your financial future. This system forces you to make lifestyle adjustments that align with your savings goals without requiring constant vigilance and willpower. If saving $600 per month means you only have $2,400 to live on after bills, you'll figure out how to live on $2,400. You'll cook more at home. You'll find free entertainment. You'll drive your current car longer. These adjustments happen naturally because the money simply isn't available to spend. You're not relying on discipline or motivation. You're relying on automation and constraint, which is infinitely more effective. So there you have it. You'll never save $100,000 if you keep using the leftover method, saving too small a percentage, letting lifestyle inflation eat every raise, failing to prepare for emergencies, carrying consumer debt, accepting stagnant income, operating without a plan, keeping everything in cash, succumbing to lifestyle pressure, or giving up when it gets hard. But if you flip to the pay yourself first model, save an aggressive percentage, resist lifestyle inflation, build financial buffers, eliminate debt, increase your income over time, create a specific plan, invest for growth, ignore social pressure, and maintain persistence even when progress feels slow, you will hit $100,000. And once you cross that threshold, you'll discover that the next $100,000 comes even faster because compound interest is finally working in your favor. The question is whether you're willing to do what it takes, or whether you'll be another person who reaches retirement with basically nothing saved and wonders where it all went wrong. The choice is yours, but the clock is ticking.